Hello, YouTubers. A story called The Clown. I knew the package would arrive sometime, but had not expected it quite so soon. The unmarked parcel had arrived not long after I got out of bed. As I opened it, I saw the big pair of clown shoes, full of jelly beans, and I sat down and cried. It had finally happened. Tiny was dead. Tiny was in fact 8 foot 2 inches tall and very slim. He was double jointed and an albino. As far as many others and I were concerned, he was the greatest clown who ever lived. He was born somewhere in Mongolia. When I first saw him, he was riding a short, stocky pony. He rode into camp and placed his feet on the ground and stood up, and the pony walked off between his legs. As he stood there, and I looked up into the reddest eyes that I'd ever seen, his long white hair tied in a ponytail reached to his waist. He dressed as a Mongolian horseman should. He came over and asked if he could stay the night in camp with us. We said yes, and invited him to eat with us. After the meal, we were surprised to see the people from the nearest village making their way to our camp. This was a rare event, because the local tribal elders had forbidden their people to have anything to do with us. They all stopped just outside the camp and quietly sat down. Tiny stood up, and a sound like a giant intake of breath rent through the crowd. Our local workers walked out of the camp and sat among the villagers. Tiny turned to his pony and nodded, and the pony came and walked between Tiny's legs, and he sat and seemed to curl up as the pony walked towards the crowd, and we got up and followed him. When Tiny reached the crowd, they stood and surrounded him, then sat in a circle, and we sat just behind them. Tiny stood, and his pony lay down, as if to wait until she was needed. There followed an hour of hilarity, as Tiny juggled, performed tricks of magic, and acrobatic tricks that were so funny, everyone, including us, were in fits of laughter. Tiny looked so sad when people started to laugh. He seemed to be trying to do everything seriously, but nothing went right. When Tiny borrowed a sword, I feared for his life. So fast were his actions, the sword seemed to have a life of its own, appearing and disappearing at will, whilst Tiny looked more and more confused. As his act neared its end, Tiny's pony stood up and stole Tiny's hat from his head and made its way into the crowd to collect something, the offerings that everyone seemed to give. Eventually the pony came up to us, and as we placed a coin in the hat, the pony turned to look at Tiny, and Tiny looked back at us, and the pony shook its head at the meagre offering we'd provided. The crowd went wild and slowly made their way home. Only children remained, and Tiny spent time with each one, talking to them before moving on. Half an hour later, Tiny made his way into the camp, and being exhausted, lay down to sleep. In the morning I spent a little time with Tiny, and it was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. Whenever we came across each other, we spent time together. And it was I who had special shoes made for him. Their large size made Tiny look even more clumsy. The shoes contained all sorts of secrets that we had come up with to help in his act. And over the years, I came to realise how hard an albino's life could be. He had several disabilities that caused him constant pain. And he had long outlived the life expectancy of such people. When his shoes arrived, I removed the bags of sweets and took them to the local school, along with the film of Tiny's act. The children reacted as children everywhere act in the presence of a clown, and their laughter rang out across the hall. The shoes I took to the school for clowns, and they were hung like battle honours in the big top, where they remain to this day, slowly rotting away. And now may you be richly blessed. May God's love pour down upon you. May his blessings fill your heart and your mind and your soul. And may he never let go of your hand. And may you live each day to the full, not worrying about the future, not worrying about the past, just living today.